My name is Dr. Paul Poyer. I'm a research professor here at the Institute of World Politics. It is my very great pleasure to host today Dr. Tawfiq Hamid. Dr. Hamid is a dear friend of mine, a wonderful guy, but in particular a very incisive thinker about radical Islam with a really unique perspective. I'm assuming that's what drew most of you here. Seldom do we find somebody who has spent time inside a jihadist organization who has come out of it, particularly one who was inducted into that organization by no less a person than Zawahiri himself. Dr. Hamid has an MD from University of Cairo, has also been graduate work in cognitive psychology, and that's one of the reasons why he was able to basically unbrainwash himself. He was able to identify the techniques that the jihadists had used to suppress his critical thinking skills and his humanity. And after a few years in the organization, really just rebelled against that attempt to suppress those critical thinking skills, wanted to begin thinking for himself, and began a process of coming out of that movement. Dr. Hamid has written a book. Actually had it here to show you all. That I've written a book review of recently. It's called appropriately Inside Jihad: How Radical Islam Works, Why It Should Terrify Us, and How to Defeat Us. So as the subtitle hints, it is somber reading. This is not light bedside table sort of reading. Nevertheless, it is necessary, and I would recommend this to every one of you. There should be enough books out there for all of you, and Dr. Hamid will be available afterward to sign them, and also afterward he'll be available for some Q&A, and for any of you that would wish to speak to him a little bit further. He's got a lot to tell us, and it will be difficult to get through his wealth of information in just an hour. So without further ado, Dr. Hamid.
Thank you. Pleasure. Thank you, Paul. Thank you so much, Paul, and thank you for coming today. It's my pleasure and honor to address all of you regarding this important topic. Let me just start with some basic definitions, because I believe that if there is no definition for things, we can argue really forever. Some people are saying, oh, most Muslims are radicals, or Muslims are peaceful. And we can go forever like this until we start to put some definitions. So taking the whole Islamic cultures initially, just to give us a frame of work here, where we are. Like, when we see the Islamic culture, we can see 5 types of or categories of people. Like, for example, we can see what we can call culture Muslims, who are just people who are called Muhammad or Fatima, and they don't know much about the details of the religion or Sharia. Their name is just like this. They celebrate what is equivalent to the Christmas, for example, but in the Muslim culture. You have what we can call ritual Muslims, who are people who do the 5 prayers and the fasting, and some of them, this level, stop at this stage and do not want to really go into the Sharia or stoning of women or killing apostates. They don't want to see a Taliban-like style ruling them, but they just want the ritual part, to do the Hajj and the praying and fasting. At this stage, it's still okay. But when you go to the inner circle here, what we can call the theological Muslims. The theological Muslims are the one who want to really practice Sharia law and follow its rules and regulations in life, in banking, in their system, in their legal system around them, in courts. So this group may not use violence by themselves to influence others with their belief system. However, they are a threat in another way, because once their number increase beyond certain limits within any society, they may start to have frictions with the rest of the society, as what is beginning to happen in Europe today. You cannot have people who wants to implement a system that allow killing apostates or putting people on the cross and amputating their hands and fingers and stoning women to death. You cannot put this system in the 21st century in a Western society without having a conflict. It's inevitable confrontation. And if the number of theological Muslims who believe in Sharia, who believe in this foundational principles of the Taliban lifestyle, for example, then we will be in trouble. You have another group, the inner circle here, the red one here, is what we can call the radical Muslims. The radicals are the ones who take the law in their hands and by force they can enforce you on their belief system. For example, they may not just stop on saying, oh, we need every woman to wear the hijab. No, they take it by violence and go to every woman telling her, you have to wear the hijab, and if you didn't, we will use violence against you. This is what I can call radical Muslims. They use violence to influence others and influence their belief system upon others. Impose their belief system. The last group here are the terrorist group or the jihadists or the suicide bombers who can use excessive form of violence in the form of suicide bombing to kill people around them, to instill fear and terror in the hearts of what they consider unbelievers. When I see this system, I would like to share with you a very simplified example to illustrate this in real life. If we have, for example, a friend, if we have a party tonight and we are inviting some friend, his name is Muhammad, for example, or Fatima, to the party. And Muhammad or Fatima celebrated everything in the party, drank some wine, danced, have just normal style of like everyone else. Likely Muhammad or Fatima are okay? If Muhammad said, excuse me for a few minutes, I will just go to do the prayer and come back to celebrate everything as usual, Muhammad is likely the ritual Muslim. If Muhammad said to you, how come you have wine or alcohol here and pork? I am very offended, I cannot tolerate this, and he left with anger, then Muhammad, but he didn't use violence, you just left with anger, Muhammad is the theological Muslim. If Muhammad broke the bottle of wine, then Muhammad is the radical Muslim. If Muhammad exploded everything, then up there, you will not be here. Up there, you will realize he was the suicide bomber, okay? So just as simple as that, it's important to see it that way so that you can evaluate even any anti-radicalization program or where a society is going. If you have clear definitions for each category, then it will be, our parameters, you will be easy to define if a culture, for example, is moving inward or outward, or what are the opposing powers within any Islamic culture. Now let us go to the part that deals with the phenomena of Islamic radicalism itself. When I talk about this part, I like to look at it as I'm basically a medical doctor. I like to see the macroscopic picture and then go deeper to the microscopic one. So I will take you through the three levels of thinking. At the level, the big picture, the macroscopic picture, which is the level of the society. What happened in the Islamic society in the last few decades that changed them to what we see today. Then we will go inside the radical group way of thinking, which I joined myself, and I will share with you my personal experience there. And the third is when you go into the mind of the individual and see at the individual level what happens exactly. When we talk about the society, a common question that many people raise is what went wrong? What happened to the Muslim world? Like few decades ago, let us say 70 years ago, Muslims, Christians, Jews were living together in peace and harmony in many, many countries in the Middle East, including Egypt, for example. You see churches, you see synagogues. You never heard at that time that Muslims are going to burn or were burning the churches or synagogues. So what happened over the last few decades? They changed the Muslim world completely to what we see today in Pakistan, Afghanistan, and the others. I can see what happened at the level of the society at three simple, basic steps. And I know that there could be other contributing factors. However, when I analyze the phenomena, and I lived this, I'm not talking here about something from books. I lived this three stages. The first stage was, if you compare this red part here, that's called Saudi Arabia now, or Hijaz, to the rest of the Muslim world, you can find a particular form of understanding of the religion in this red area or the Hijaz area that was very intolerant to the other, does not accept the existence of anyone that is different. Like you can see, no Jews, no Christians existed in Saudi Arabia, no synagogues, no churches, no Sufi mosques even. They cannot, the concept of accepting the other does not exist there. Plus extreme suppression of women, extreme suppression of arts and the music. So you have a form of desert style, let us call it the desert style of Islam, and you have a mixed form of Islam that was mixed with the Judeo-Christian culture maybe, or some Sufi way of thinking. This form of Islam that existed to some extent in Egypt, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, these parts of the world, was not perfect because in many situations it was treating the non-Muslims as second-class citizens. However, it was at least allowing the other to exist. Churches existed, synagogues existed, music and art and dancing existed. What happened in the last few decades when the oil was discovered in the area of Saudi Arabia? And this was the beginning of the story, believe me. We started to say, look how Allah blessed those in Saudi Arabia, not because they have, for example, good government or any, no, because they implement the Sharia rules. This was the very first step. So we started to say, if we adopted their understanding of the religion and the Sharia rules, we will be blessed like them. And we will have economic prosperity and we will improve. And this was, I used to say it myself to my father. My father was an orthopedic surgeon, he was an atheist, okay? And I used to tell him, if we applied it like Saudi Arabia, the Islam like Saudi Arabia, we will have this wealth and we'll have this blessing. And this was completely wrong. However, this was the case. And that's why you see at that time, in the beginning of the Islamic revival, was not from 1948, of the declaration of the State of Israel. It was from the late 70s. You see the change in Muslim women starting to wear the hijab. You see people caring more about Hajj and the praying. You see more Islamic books in the market. You see we call the Islamic revival happening in the late 70s, which correlates in time with the rise of oil prices of Saudi Arabia after Yom Kippur War. The price of oil went from $12 a gallon to $44 a gallon, something like that. And this big shift allowed the economy in Saudi Arabia to go high, and we started to say, look how Allah blessed them with this money because they practice Sharia. After that, we took the concepts of Sharia, and we have this spread of what we called at that time, or some intellectual called, the petro-Islam. This was the word that was used to describe this phenomena. When petro-Islam started to come to us, we decided to replace our previously moderate understanding of the religion, or relatively moderate, with this understanding. But we did something that was really destructive. I mean here because it was initiated by the scholars, Islamic scholars like Al-Zawahiri and others in Egypt. So I witnessed the debate itself about jihad. We took the concept of jihad and changed the theological interpretation for it in the way that I'm going to describe to you. Jihad, according to the Sharia books and mainstream Islamic books, it's not my opinion, it is the books, what they say. It's a form of war against non-Muslims to either to defend yourself or to spread the religion. After offering people one of three options, either to convert to Islam or pay humiliating tax to me called jizya, or you will be killed. These are the three. What ISIS is doing today, they are just practicing what is written in the mainstream Islamic books, just simple like that. They are not creating it. This is the typical definition of jihad as Islamic books describe it. So what happened, the concept of jihad was at a nation level. I was supposed to wait to join an Islamic army, for example, and to declare war on the Roman Empire or Persian Empire in traditional warfare. This was typical of jihad. So it was a violent principle, but it was at a nation level. So what happened? We changed it theologically in our Jama'at Islamiyya and radical groups from a nation responsibility to individual responsibility. We changed the level based on certain verses in the Quran and the Hadith. One of the verses, for example, that says, فَقَاتِلْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ لَا تُكَلَّفْ إِلَّا نَفْسُكَ. Fight for the cause of Allah. You are only responsible for yourself. So we started to say jihad is not a nation responsibility, it is a personal one. I will no longer wait till the Islamic army is created and to join it. I will do it today on you. So if the traditional jihad was a violent principle, we changed it to make it barbaric principle. So that is the only difference. I cannot say that change was from peaceful to violent. It was from a violent to a barbaric one. It was from a violent but at nation level traditional warfare to a barbaric one at individual level. So in the past, if I wanted to declare jihad on you, let us say you Americans, I would have to wait for to join an Islamic army to declare war on you, traditional warfare. With the new definition of jihad, with making it personal, I will explode myself in you personally. That is the difference, and that is the basic, the roots for all what we see today of individual cases of jihad or small groups. It started initially by small groups declaring jihad, not waiting for the Islamic army as a whole, and then it became individual levels declaring jihad on you. And this was the root cause of the suicide bombing that we see today. This is a change of the level of jihad. So number one was petro-Islam. Number two, we changed the level of jihad to make it personal. Number three, the spread to other parts of the world, which simply with your wonderful immigration policies here in the West, and now with the internet technology, the ideology is spreading everywhere. So the phenomena that was dormant to some extent in certain place has spread all over the world, partially because you were not able to distinguish who you are inviting or who are you allowing in your countries. And at the same time, recently with the internet, the phenomena spread more and more. Then, inside the radical groups, what happens? When you join a radical group, what happens to you? I call them brainwashing tactics because I see myself as a model here. I was a child who was born for a secular family, and my father was not religious, and within 6 or 8 months of joining this group, I changed it completely to be a beast, really a beast in my way of thinking. I was planning ready to do anything and justify it in the name of religion, killing, doing everything and considering it halal or permissible for me. So I would like to share with you what happened to me in person. What happened was, and it happened to many other people as well, was number one step was suppression of my critical thinking. I will never forget the first day I went to pray in the Jama'at Islamiyya group. It was in our medical school, and I went walking beside someone called Mukhtar. He was one of the leaders of GI of Egypt, and he said to me, do you know Tariq? My real name is Tariq. Tawfiq is the one I use for this. So I'm just telling you exactly what happened. I don't like. He said to me, do you know, Tariq, what that the most important thing you need to learn with us is the following. I said to him, what? He said to me, al-fikru kufr. Fikr in Arabic, F-K-R. Okay, fikr. Kufr, K-F-R. They are the same letters, but they are just different arrangement. The first one means to think. The second one means to become an infidel. So the first lesson he taught me was, if I started to think, I will become an infidel. Not only that, he said to me, look, Tariq, if your brain, which is my brain, is like a donkey in the Arab culture represents stupidity. It's not hard work, it's stupidity. So it's a bit of an insult. And he said to me, the donkey can help you reach the palace of the king. You ride the donkey until you reach the palace, which is Islam, Allah, Quran. But when you reach the palace of the king, do you take your donkey or my brain inside, or you leave it outside? I said to him, I leave the donkey outside. And I was welcomed. This was the very first step. I remember it very well. I remember the directions we were hitting toward the mosque of the Jama'at Islamiyya, and that direction. I remember every moment here. because this was crucial for me. And when we went inside the mosque, it was legal, by the way, legal organization, to pray with the Jama'ah Islamiyah, I found them caring much about having my shoulder touching their shoulders, and the imam of the prayer, the leader, wanted to make sure that every shoulder is touching the other one. And not only that, this is relatively common in some mosques, okay? But what was new was they want our feet also to touch one another. So I had to stand really in very awkward position. My heel was, I hated it. My heel was going outside, and I had to stand like this, and he spent around 20 minutes doing this. I remember I was annoyed because I had biochemistry lecture that day, and I was very annoyed of the delay, because we can start the prayer and that's it, but he wanted, and I couldn't understand why. Then the answer came at the end. The Imam said to us, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الَّذِينَ يُقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِهِ صَفًّا كَأَنَّهُمْ بُنْيَانٌ مَرْصُوصٌ. It's an Arabic verse from the Quran that says, God loves those who fight for his cause as if they are one cemented wall together, no gaps between them. So he wanted us in the prayer to stand like a wall, no gaps at all. And I will show you at the end how this is implemented with the radicals. In this particular moment, believe me, I felt I am at war. Even I was in a prayer, but psychologically I felt I am at war. The war was with you, with the West. And I'll tell you honestly, we hated you not because of what you hear of the Arab-Israeli conflict and because of this and that. We hated you for one thing: your freedom. Believe me. You have a system that was completely opposite to what we were promoting. We were promoting killing apostate, you promote freedom of religion. We were promoting suppression of women, you promoted freedom for women. We were promoting stoning of women to death for adult, you were promoting elements of freedom and not using any violence in such barbaric manner. We were promoting XYZ, you were promoting the opposite. So this is why we hated you. Believe me. And the woman issue was for us fundamental. So suppression of my critical thinking was the very first step. Then they used severe punishment in hell in a very frightening way. It's not just simply telling you will go to hell in general. No. The torture techniques are described to you in details that make you frightened, unable to think, unable to criticize. I will quote you one of the verses that says, for example, if you didn't obey what they are telling you, and this is a quote from the Quran, يُصَبُّ مِنْ فَوْقِ رُؤُوسِهِمُ الْحَمِيمِ. The boiling water will be poured over their heads. يُصْهَرُ بِهِ مَا فِي بُطُونِهِمْ وَالْجُلُودِ. It will dissolve their tissues and their guts. Not only that, كُلَّمَا نَضَجَتْ جُلُودُهُمْ. Whenever their skins are completely destroyed by the fire and blackened. بدلناهم جلودا غيرها ليذوقوا العذاب. We will replace it with new skins so that they become retortured again and again for infinity of time. This was not a joke for a young person starting to learn about religion. This is not peace, love, and harmony. So when you are taught in this way, your brain becomes distorted to a level that, believe me, I used to accept things that's completely against my human conscience. But because if I did not accept it, I will go to this hell. It's like making, not just accept, I have to love it. It's like making you eat something like mud, and you are not supposed to just say it is good. You are supposed to feel it is good. If you didn't feel it is good, you will go to this hell forever. To that level, the torture was so controlling that we had to do certain things that completely contradicts our human conscience. But what can I do? It is the will of Allah. It has to taste good. To that degree, to change the receptors of the brain and the blood receptors of I'm serious about this. That's why you see these distorted mentalities happening. They use this hellfire effectively, and I'm not talking here about the concept of hellfire. I'm talking about the use of this concept to make people hate rather than love, to make people use barbaric violence instead to make them peaceful. So I'm not talking about the hell here. I'm talking about the use of the hellfire in this direction. Also, they make the second life more important for us than this life, which facilitates the desire to do any jihadi activity to go to the second life and die for Allah, the martyr, guaranteed paradise. Solution is Islam was also one of the things that the Muslim Brotherhood and other group promoted everywhere, that Islam will bring solution for everything. And the model was Saudi Arabia, of course. The economic success of Saudi Arabia was the greatest model for us, that they implement the Sharia, and that's why this is how we used to think became like this. The fifth brainwashing tactic was what I call sex deprivation syndrome. And I mean this literally. In this time period until now, marriage is very difficult because it's in the Middle East, because it's very costly. In the Muslim culture, the man has to pay a lot, and it's for the house, for everything. So it's very costly. And also any extramarital relationship is not accepted by the religion and also culturally to a great extent. And not only that, most of the Islamic scholars, not all, but most of them, prohibited any physiological release of sexual desires. So, what happened is complete suppression here. You have to suppress this element of human physiology to unbelievable extent. No marriage, no extramarital relationship, no physiological release, and the first chance for you to be able to even touch a hand of a woman was supposed to be after 15 years or 20 years, after puberty, until you built yourself financially. So there was extreme suppression. And believe me, the more they suppress this issue, the more the attraction of women increases. And what aggravates the problem was that when we used to go and read in the Islamic books, they used to describe the women waiting for us there in paradise in details. It's like, believe me, it's like pornography in writing. And it's in the Sharia and traditional mainstream Islamic books. I can show all of you this with evidence. It's not an opinion. So you have the details, the descriptions, and how people will be able to have 1,000 times sex every day. And it's bizarre. There are many things that I cannot even share with you. So we used to have all this element of sexual suppression, and at the same time you have all these fantasies waiting up there in paradise for you. And this creates a distorted way of thinking that led many of us, if not a significant number, to be ready to do suicide bombing, to go to die in jihad, just to go to paradise for one reason: to have sex. It's very strange. I know for Westerners, it's completely outside their box of thinking or way of thinking, but this was the reality. And as I always say it, we used to have no single reason to stay here on earth and 72 reasons to go up there to paradise. You know, the 72 virgins, paradise, and all this story. So it's a reality. Let us just bring some evidence to support this fact. Number one, predominantly suicide bombing occurs in males. This cannot be just luck. There is possible element of testosterone or role of testosterone in the process. Number two, when you analyze the peak of testosterone level in the body, in human body, this is from a biochemistry endocrinology books, and you can see the peak around the age of 18, 17, 18, 19, which coincides exactly with the peak age of suicide bombers. So this just cannot be luck. The predominantly in male peak suicide bombing age is the same peak of testosterone level. Not only that, if you compare the Shia and Sunni, you will find amazing striking difference in the rate of suicide bombing. If you know, in Iraq, for example, almost all suicide bombing occurs by the hand of Shia or Sunni. The suicide bombing now, typically the Sunni, okay? One of the reasons, but not the only reason, it's one of the reasons is possibly that the Shia theology as a religion allows what is called mut'a marriage, which is a temporary marriage for enjoyment that can last only for 1 hour. I'm serious here. The Sunni do not allow this. So a young Shia Muslim have some opportunity to release his sexual desires, while a young Sunni Muslim has to suppress it to unbelievable levels. This does not say that the young Shia will not do suicide bombing. They can do, but it depends on another mechanism. If their Marja'iyya or Ayatollah, for example, Khamenei, order them to do so, they will. But it's not based on a sexual deprivation concept as I'm explaining here. So I'm talking here about the role of sex deprivation in the process. If you compare the Shia and Sunni difference, you can see clearly that those who are more sexually suppressed, like in the Sunni, have more tendency towards suicide bombing as a factor, not the factor, a factor in the process of suicide bombing. So this comes with the concept, supporting the concept of sex deprivation syndrome as and the role of it in creating this tendency of suicide bombers. At the individual level, let us just put one question first. Why people generally join a group? And then what are their motives? And then what happens in their brain, the psychodynamics, what I call the psychodynamics of the process. People join for several reasons, but the main reason in my view is to serve the religion. This is number one. Some people say it is poverty, which seems for me illogical because there are, but it is a reality. Some people join the Islamic group because they were poor and the Islamic groups support them financially. Some feel inferiority in the society and they want to join a group that gives them some form of respect in their Islamic societies. Revenge occasionally play a role, like the Black Widows of Russia, for example, in Russia, of Chechnya, they sometimes do suicide bombing or kill to revenge something happened from the Russian soldiers, for example. So there are multitude of reasons for the first step to join, but serving the religion, in my view, is the most crucial one. The dedication to serve the religion is for me was the case. For many of my friends, it was number one in many cases, as I have seen. The motives of the radicals. It's important to know the motive of your opponent, otherwise you will be in trouble. For example, if you have seen bin Laden laughing and smiling after September 11th, you should wonder, what did he gain out of it? What did bin Laden gain? Did he gain any specific money or more territory or gold or oil or anything? No. So why Nidal Hassan? What did Nidal Hassan of Fort Hood massacre or those people in California, what did they gain? Nothing. So why they do it? That's vital to understand. If the motive of your opponent is to have a piece of land or some money, you can negotiate on table. As what happened with the Russians in Cold War, for example. There is some important concept here. The Russians in the Cold War wanted to live. That's why there was mutually asserted destruction, and you know that your opponent will unlikely attack you because they want to live also. If they attack you, you will erase them from the map. So they will lose it all. The same for the Nazi Germany and the Emperor of Japan. They surrendered at the end because they want to live. The leaders, the military leaders around here wanted to live, and the Emperor of Japan wanted to live. So after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they surrendered. And also with Germany, because they know that if they continue, they will be destroyed, they will be killed. But have you ever heard any Islamic group that surrendered? No, and you will never hear this. Because, except in few situations, but not through killing, it's another concept. I will talk later about this. The principle here is when you deal with enemy that wants to die, that's completely different story. Because traditional enemies want to live. So at least you have a moment when you say, if you didn't do this, I will kill you. Okay, I will do it and the problem is solved. You can negotiate on table. Even with North Korea, you may have some ability to negotiate because they want to live. They don't want paradise to live there forever. They don't want to die. My dream at the moment was just to die for Allah. So I'm telling you what not only me, many people felt, just to die for Allah. This was the dream. So when you deal with people like this, you have to realize that just by simply telling them, we capture some of you and we will kill them, it doesn't really work. much in their mind. And we'll talk about this later in more details. But what they want is to die as a shaheed. This is their motive. To give pain to you, just to give pain. Just they enjoy giving you pain because you are, in their view, infidels, or to feel the victory of Islam. So this completely different from piece of land or money. You cannot negotiate about these things. Okay, this is an ideology. You have to work through different dynamics. Also, when it comes to the dynamics, what happens in the brain, in the mind itself. If I am here and one of you came to me and told me, Tawfiq, go and kill this person there, okay? Just the American flag is here, so I didn't want to point it. Someone here, okay? First thing you need to do is to make me hate that individual. Otherwise, why should I go and kill him? So the very first step in the psychodynamics of the process is to make me hate that individual. Then if I moved forward to kill him, my human conscience may tell me, Tawfiq, this man didn't do anything to you. Why should you kill him? So my human conscience may start hurting me and telling me not to do so. So you need also to teach me how to suppress my human conscience. And the third step, if I reach the final step of killing the guy, my hand may shake in the last moment if I am not used to the use of violence. So you need also to make my brain desensitized to the use of violence. The three steps goes one following the other until you reach a moment when anyone can take you into suicide bombing or whatever jihadi activity is. And the process actually typically uses religious teaching to teach you how to hate Jews and the Christians, for example, or Muslims who do not follow your belief system exactly. They teach you how to suppress your human conscience, otherwise you will go to this hell. They teach you how to become desensitized to the use of violence when they justify killing people in such a brutal way, or stoning women to death, or burning people alive. So gradually you lose part of your humanity and you lose your ability to become normal human being, full of love to others, not accepting violence. The basic elements of a good human being are completely lost when you started to hate, when you suppress your human conscience, and when you become desensitized to the use of violence. You reach a threshold where anyone can come next to take you to the next step, which is explosion, suicide bombing, or whatever they do to kill and destroy the others. Now, let us go to the issue of the aggravating factor here. Because for any phenomena, as a doctor, I can tell you, for any phenomena, you need to understand its aggravating factor. So if the blood sugar is elevated today in some patient, I will not just say, oh, your blood level is elevated. I have to think, what are the aggravating factors for this? It's just deterioration of the condition of diabetes itself, or maybe he's using medication that making insulin not working properly, like diuretics, or maybe he's becoming more obese and that impedes insulin action. I have to think in the aggravating factors, so to treat the case correctly or effectively. So when I see the aggravating factors here, there are many aggravating factors. I will go fast through them because of the time limits of today, so I will not be able to go into details, but I will give you some flavor of the concept of the aggravating factors, like the weakness, for example. Do you remember the attack on Kenya and Tanzania in the US Embassy in August 1998? Everyone remembers it and how many people were killed, but everyone also remembers that the response to this attack was very weak. Relatively, it was not strong enough at that time, and the outcome was there. They felt America is weak, is not responding strongly enough, and this was more of a political decision, not a military probably problem, but it was the reaction. If it was stronger, the radicals would have seen America through different eyes, but the reaction was relatively weak, and this could have encouraged them to launch another attack. So weakness in general provokes another attacks on you. Concessions. When I say concessions, I don't mean what you consider as concession. I mean what they see as concession. If you see the cartoon issue of Prophet Muhammad, for example, it was published just a second. It was first published in 30th of September 2005 until 31st of January 2006, which is 4 months period, there were no single violent reaction for 4 month period. Do you know when the violence started? After 48 hours of the apology of the Jihadism Postin magazine. When the magazine apologized after 4 months period, within 48 hours, violence erupted throughout the world, all over the world. This tells you that the apology really worked in the opposite way. I am not saying an apology is something bad, but I am saying in their mind it represents sign of weakness and encourage them to start violence. So you have to really understand the phenomena is not only you. There is other part of the phenomena that interpret your actions in a different way. Also, justifications for the problem. Some people say it's poverty, lack of education, Arab-Israeli conflict. And when people say poverty or any of these factors, lack of education or whatever, the question comes, or lack of democracy, why non-Muslims who live under the same socio-economic and political circumstances do not develop terrorism? Why the poor people in India, for the Hindus, for example, do not do suicide bombing, or in Latin America? Why it is particularly this group of people? If it's not the ideology, why this particular group of people, every time poverty and lack of education and lack of democracy is affecting them in this way, while the young Christians or young Hindus are not affected in the same way by the same factors? This can tell you the role of ideology crystal clear. And when people say it is poverty, the other question comes. There are many poor people from other faiths who do not do suicide bombing. And not only that, if you analyze the issue of poverty particularly, we will see the opposite of what many people think. Do you remember the attack on Egypt in Al-Aqsa massacre, 1996? What happened on this day? 62 people were killed by the hands of the jihadists, Japanese people, tourists mostly. They poked their eyes, they cut their ears. It was just terrible. So what happened after the terrorist act? What do you expect tourism industry? What happened to it? It went down. What happened to the economy? It went down. When the economy went down, poverty increases. And when poverty increased, recruitment to the radical groups becomes easier. So when you see the picture here, it was not poverty that caused terrorism. It was actually terrorism that causes poverty. Imagine Afghanistan or Iraq if Islamic jihadism and terrorism was not existent. Imagine these nations. They would have been flourishing today with better economy, better wealth, better democracy. So what destroyed them? Believe me, it was not you. It was their ideology that destroyed everything there. You give them the opportunity to have freedom, to choose their leaders, and they lost it. They lost it because of their ideology that justifies killing in the name of God. So when you see poverty is actually the outcome of terrorism rather than the other way around. Terrorism breeds poverty, and poverty aggravates terrorism. But the primary factor here is terrorism, not the poverty issue. Because poverty in other places of the world does not cause terrorism. It's only when the ideological factor of Islamism is added to it. People say it's lack of democracy. Was Nidal Hassan, for example, of Fort Hood massacre, did he do his attack because of lack of democracy in America? Or was the people in Paris, for example, recently, some French citizens contributed to the attack, were they doing this because France does not have democracy? You think this is something that I should believe in? And when people say it is the Arab-Israeli conflict, I have one question for all these who raise this issue. Are you trying to convince me that, this is what I'm saying to them, killing more than 150,000 Algerian citizens, civilians, peaceful citizens, by the hand of the Islamic radical groups, the Salafi group in Algeria, and killing Shia and mutilating their dead bodies in Iraq by the hands of the Sunnis, exploding the Sufi mosques and killing tens of people in Pakistan. Is it all because the Arab-Israeli conflict? Are Muslims killing one another in such a brutal way because of the Arab-Israeli conflict? I think people are trying just to find any reason but not the reality. And this is one of the problems we will address soon. This is the example of terrorism, how it causes poverty and poverty feeds back on it. But the primary factor is terrorism and the ideology of it. And poverty comes next. Let them treat terrorism and its ideology correctly, and their economic reforms will grow better. So the focus has to be this word, the one in the yellow, terrorism, and the ideology of it. Passive terrorism, also to summarize it in one word, do you remember how many people on the Muslim world demonstrated in the streets against the cartoon issue of Prophet Muhammad, or against France for banning the hijab? Do you remember this? Hundreds of thousands. Let me ask you one question. Have you ever seen one single demonstration by the Muslim world of this magnitude and with this passion against bin Laden or against ISIS? This is what I call passive terrorism. Just by not reacting strongly enough against the jihadists, but by not showing this in action, this is conveying a message of support to the jihadists, and this is what gives them more energy to continue more and more. Theological deception play a role. When they claim, for example, jihad is a peaceful concept, okay? Before even addressing this point or mentioning it, when people say jihad is a peaceful concept and they bring a hadith of Prophet Muhammad that says jihad is to struggle against your evil thoughts in your mind. It's not, has nothing to do with violence. If it has nothing to do with violence, why we have not seen a single Islamic organization that is charitable for caring for orphans, for example, and widows, that's calling itself jihad? Why all jihadi groups are violent? If we misunderstood the word, are they also, don't they understand it also? So let's say we are foreigners. I will assume I'm a foreigner, okay? And I don't understand the word, but all jihadi groups are violent. Is it just luck? Is it just my misunderstanding of the word jihad? So this is basic ABCs. The second is they use a deception tactic. For example, they tell you the hadith of Prophet Muhammad that I just mentioned. Jihad is internal struggling against evil. Has nothing to do with wars. But you go to the definition of jihad in Sharia books, it's wars. You go to this particular hadith, and in the mainstream Islamic books that's published and printed here in the United States, actually, I'm saying the publisher is Islamic, of course, but I'm saying you can buy them on Amazon. They are not something secret or hidden. They can tell you that this particular hadith is a weak hadith. So it's not binding for Muslims, but they use it very well for the Westerners to deceive them. You see the tactic, they mention hadith for you, you see, oh, look how jihad is peaceful. Wonderful. But between them and the other Muslims, oh, it is weak hadith, don't follow it. I'm just saying it to the Westerners just to make the Islam looks nice. And that is the problem here, what I call theological deception. Political correctness is a real nightmare because it is a form of, let me be very frank, dishonesty. When some doctor evaluate a pathology slide and it is cancer, and because he does not want to offend you or the patient, says to the patient, it's only common cold. How would you consider this doctor? Is he an honest man? Is he professional? So how about people who work for the security of the world and nations? When they face a problem like this, and instead of directing finger to the ideological factor clearly and straightforward, saying, oh, it's not the ideology, it has to be anything else but the ideology. This is not an honest research. When you do an honest research, I'm a doctor and I mean it literally, you go with no pre-assumptions. You put the research for research. If it was the ideology, you say it is the ideology. If it was not the ideology, you say it is not the ideology. If it is a mix, say it is a mix. But don't go into your research saying, no, it cannot be this. So what if it was? You can't go evaluate a pathology slide saying, no, 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 it can't be cancer, it can't be cancer. Then you start evaluation. It doesn't work that way. Honest scientific researchers has to do their job more effectively, I believe so. So political correctness played a role. Tolerance. I will quote my wife, Maha, here. She is not with us today, but she is the one really who said this to me one day. She was cooking something in the kitchen, I remember very well, coming, and I remember President Obama was speaking, and he was saying we became beacon in America here for liberty and democracy because we were tolerant. And she came with a bit of anger saying, this is wrong. And in fact, the US became beacon for liberty and modernity and democracy because it was intolerant. I said to her, how come? She said to me, had America been tolerant of slavery, slavery would still exist in America today. So you enjoy your freedoms today, not because you were tolerant, but because you were intolerant to evil. Because you were intolerant to slavery, intolerant to discrimination against women, intolerant to discrimination against the blacks, intolerant to many evil things. And that's what makes you America today. It was not because of your tolerance, sadly, but this is a reality. So her name is Maha, and that's why I quoted her just as a matter of scientific honesty, because it's not my thing, it's hers. Another one is the incorrect analysis. This really gets me really crazy when I see people saying that, look, it cannot be the ideology. I say to them, why it cannot be the ideology? They said, because the majority of the Muslims are peaceful people, and that is a fact. Majority are not really doing terrorism, that's true. And they came to the conclusion, jump to the conclusion that this means the ideology has nothing to do with the problem, if the majority of Muslims are peaceful. And I give the following example. The majority of smokers do not develop lung cancer. That is a fact. Can you disagree with me? The majority of this is a medical fact, okay? Take it for you, do your research. Majority of smokers do not develop lung cancer. Yet, this does not negate the fact that smoking is the main cause of lung cancer. Similarly, the majority of Muslims do not develop terrorism. This does not negate the fact that Islamic ideology is the main cause of terrorism. So simple. What I'm saying, I will repeat it again. The majority of smokers do not develop lung cancer. Does not negate or does not contradict the fact that lung cancer is mainly caused by smoking. The same, the majority of Muslims do not develop terrorism. This does not contradict the fact that Islamic ideology is the main cause of terrorism. Put them together and you will get it. Is it clear, or you want me to... clear, okay, perfect. So because I found silence, so silence means many things for me. So this is irrational and incorrect analysis. Can cause serious trouble to the world, because if you put incorrect analysis from the beginning in any problem, then you will never solve it, because you will always say, oh, it cannot be the ideology because majority are peaceful. Compare it to the cigarettes and you will realize, no, it can be. Majority are peaceful, yes, but Islamic ideology is the main cause of the problem. Insufficient solutions. I will mention to you a concept that I developed recently, and it was under a title, Shall We Develop Anti-Terrorism Vaccine? And my concept was that we managed to defeat polio, and eradicate it not by dealing with or by curing the sick ones. The eradication process predominantly happened by working on the normal people, by vaccinating the normal ones to prevent the spread of the infection. The same model can be applied, and I'm not underestimating the need for military confrontation with the militants, okay? But the concept, you can significantly weaken the phenomena of Islamic terrorism by working on the outer circles. Remember the circles that I mentioned initially? By working at the normal level and the people pre-radical stage, to vaccinate them by mental vaccine to prevent the spread of the radical ideology within them. There are many things to be done in this way, especially with the internet now. You can do a lot of things. So what I am saying is bringing a different way of understanding for the problem. The focus shouldn't be only the last step. The terrorist is the last step. If you intervene at earlier stages, you can decrease significantly the number of people coming in the center of the circles. So if you work it at the periphery, so this is what I'm saying here by insufficient solution. The whole philosophy was focused predominantly on one sector, which is the terrorists. Yes, that's important, the crucial. I'm not underestimating it at all. But parallel to that, there is a need for a parallel work to prevent the spread of the radical views within the normal population at the peripheral levels of the circles, as I described earlier. This part, the hijab phenomena, I know it is strange for the Western audience to talk about a code of dress that's an aggravating factor for jihadism and terrorism. And before I start this, I want to clarify one point, which is that I'm not talking here about the hijab at individual level, okay? So some women who wear the hijab, my wife used to wear it, now not, but she used to for years and years, okay? So I'm talking here not about an individual, but I'm talking about a phenomena. So an individual wearing the hijab may be individually a very nice human being, okay? But as a phenomena, it is a dangerous phenomena. Let me show you some examples. In any Islamic culture or society, there is a specific pattern that almost, I cannot say always, I say it's always, sorry, I'm saying always repeated everywhere in the world. Everywhere. You go to Egypt, to Indonesia, to Jordan, to Algeria, everywhere, and go backward to analyze, you will see that this is, for example, the Egyptian society in 1950. Okay, they looked like this. My mother looked like this, and most of them have the photos in this era. All of them are like this. In the late 70s, we started the Islamic revival, and the hijab, I used to promote the hijab for women there, started to become more prevalent. After the hijab, you will start to have radicalism happening. This temporal relationship is not challenged even once. I'm saying it's not, there is no, this rule is not broken even for one single case. You go to any Islamic culture and society and see the photos of the 50s, even Afghanistan, even Pakistan, okay? And then compare it to the late 70s, 80s, 90s. You will see the hijab. Then you will have terrorism developing. Could it be coincidence? Maybe, but when it is repeated, I have to think. Not only that, when you see the Islamic groups putting their primary attention everywhere, wherever they control any society or territory, the first thing they do is to make women wear the hijab. Why? If it is not so fundamental. I was personally asked, for example, in the Jama'ah Islamiyah, to focus on the hijab. I never asked a woman to pray or to fast in Ramadan or to do Hajj. It was only the hijab. Why? I will explain why. Because the hijab is the winning point for them. This is their winning tactic. I will show you how it is the winning tactic. This is the priority of any Islamic group. You go to Abdul Nasser. You know Nasser, this is in all the photos after the 1952 revolution, sitting beside the Murshid or the supreme leader of the Muslim Brotherhood, okay? The supreme leader of the Muslim Brotherhood met with Nasser after this in person, and it is on YouTube in Arabic, so I can show this to you. Anyone can have it in Arabic. Abdul Nasser speaking to the Egyptian people, telling them in his private meeting with the supreme leader of the Muslim Brotherhood back then. The supreme leader of the Brotherhood asked him for one thing, not two. Do you know what was it? The hijab. To make Egyptian women wear the hijab. Muslim women. Are you telling me that this guy is also crazy? Is it just luck? to have this temporal relationship, to have the priority of the Islamic groups, the hijab, and then to have the Muslim Brotherhood leader just mentioning one thing for Abdul Nasser in personal meeting. It's on videotape for Nasser, it's not an opinion. One thing, the hijab. Then you compare even Al-Anbar area with the highest level of terrorism. You see women, these are even actually escaping from an Anbar area, okay? Compare them to women in general in Kurdistan area. You can see huge difference in the way they look. These ones with the hijab, these ones without. So what does the hijab do exactly? It works like this. Number one, the hijab according to Sharia is a dress code to mainly, this is not opinion, this is Sharia, to distinguish between free women and the slaves. Free women are the only ones who are allowed to wear it in the Muslim society, okay? To distinguish themselves from the slaves. So it is dress code of supremacy. It's like the Nazi, the feeling of supremacy is so destructive, and that is what happens. It's unintentionally, it makes them feel superior to the others. I am wearing the hijab, I'm not exposed like these people. This is how it goes in their mind. Then not only that, once they started to wear the hijab, it creates a feeling that societies who are promoting freedom for women are evil, bad societies. And it creates hatred toward these societies. So the first step in the psychodynamics, you remember, was hatred. Not only that, once a woman starts to wear the hijab, the whole family, because for example, if I love beer, for example, I can't go and sit and say with my wife, she's wearing the hijab, and drink beer. It would look bizarre in the Muslim culture, okay? Especially, so not only that, it's continuous reminder with the religion. Every moment you see her in your wife, or you see your mother, or you see your sister, it's reminder with the religion continuously. So the Islamization of the family of the societies goes very fast after that. The Muslim Brotherhood tried without hijab after 1928, and they failed. But the hijab gave them another factor. The distorted judgment. As a child, you typically would judge people before the hijab era based on their deeds. If you are kind to me, you are helping me, I'm sick, you take care of me, you are a good human being. This is how human brain should judge people, by deeds. But the hijab make many people feel, oh, my neighbor is evil and bad because she doesn't wear the hijab. We used to immediately classify humans. Is she wearing the hijab or not wearing the hijab? This is the way we used to think, and many people today. So we used to hate anyone who's not wearing it. She is the enemy of Allah, the enemy of Islam. And we started to judge her whatever she will do to us. And this can tell you why many Muslim nations are not grateful for the support of Western societies to them, because this will continuously hate you as long as you do not abide with this Islamic system. So it's distorted judgment. You judge people now, she is wearing the hijab, she is okay, she is good. She is not wearing it, whatever she will do to you. She is a Christian, for example, and not wearing the hijab, the enemy of Allah. You will hate her, and you will have distorted judgments that can allow you to do evil things to good people, because you can't see them as good anymore, because they are not wearing the hijab. Not only that, hijab makes them feel the ummah. Now a Muslim woman in France, like in Britain, in Indonesia, in Pakistan, in America, they are creating their own ummah. You know what I mean by the ummah, the Islamic nation together? So it creates their ummah through this hijab. They recognize one another, have a photo for human beings, the Chinese, the Indians, this and that and that. You'll have no difference except with this thing here, the hijab. And this is, believe me, the winning, we call it the virulent factor in medicine for organisms, the virulent factor that causes the victory for them, and it gives them a feel of victory as long as the hijab is on their head dress. So if you see that temporal relationship, the priority of the Islamic groups towards the hijab, the murshid of the Muslim Brotherhood, the supreme leader, asking for one thing, the hijab, And if you compare the terrorist number or percentage in Kurdistan and in Anbar area, both are Sunnis, by the way. Both are Sunnis. So you cannot say Shia and Sunni. No, both are Sunnis. But the hijab, which does, I'm not talking here about an individual again. I'm talking here about the big phenomena, okay? Part two, I used to be a chess player, so I use this photo, a strategic plan to defeat radical Islam. Would you mind I drink some water to just give this the final section? Yeah. Just a second. Sorry, I didn't offer the water, but it's just 2 minutes. When we talk about a strategic approach to this problem, we need to look at the basic fundamental components of it. The pre-radicals, and then the radicals, becoming radical, and then you have the militant. These are the three components that we have to deal with in such a strategic approach. At the pre-radical, let us start with the militant. This is the most threatening one. You certainly need kinetic power with them. You need military, you need counter-terrorism efforts, you need all of this, no doubt, with those who have weapons in their hands. With the radicals, you need what I can consider as negative reinforcement tactic, because now the situation for the Islamic radicals to join a jihadi group and do suicide bombing or do terrorist act or join them is win-win-win situation. If they manage to be victorious, they are winning. They control territory, they implement Sharia rules as they want, so they are victorious. If they died for Allah and they will go to paradise and they will enjoy wonderful life there in their view, and they are winning, victorious. If they were caught by the Western military, for example, they will have wonderful human rights activists defending them, protecting them, bringing halal food for them in Guantanamo Bay, having a soccer field for them to play. They will not be tortured or humiliated or anything. So why not to do it? Why not to join a jihadi group? It is win-win-win situation for them. Unless you change this paradigm and give them what I consider a strong negative reinforcement. And you may say they don't care about death. That is true. But there are other things they care about. Like, for example, the hijab. They care about it. For example, if bin Laden knew that next day of September 11th, if you told bin Laden and al-Zawahiri that America will kill every Muslim in the world, they wouldn't care. But if you told them America will stop the hijab or fight it, he would have thought twice before doing it. This is why we have a conflict with this mentality. You think in a completely different way. You think in a really different way. And that's why the problem seems to be, it's not seems, it is. It's really getting worse since September 11th till now. Things are, I can't say geographically and geopolitically, we are in a better situation. I don't think so. Okay. So a negative reinforcement is important. Also with the pre-radicals, you need a theological reform. I will give you an example here. You need to change the thinking process of people that breeds radicalism, because radicalism is not just simply created by religious views. The way of thinking itself also sometimes can make you radical. So it's another factor. What I call the shaking the foundations strategies, we'll have a look at it. We need to deal with the hijab phenomena. There are many tactics, not necessarily simply by banning it. Banning is the weakest one. There are much more effective ways to deal with it. And you have to deal with the components that I mentioned of the brainwashing tactics, the psychodynamics, and the logistics of the radicals. All of this has to be in a strategic vision, but on the right side, this is the part that I'm focused at. The first thing, I'm fleshing it out just in the next few minutes, is to define the enemy. this is the most important step in this war, is to define your enemy. Is the enemy, is it just the terrorist or the scholar who taught him to do violence and to kill others? Is it just the terrorist or the scholar and the scholars and institutes like the Wahhabi system and the other who are teaching them to hurt that? So your enemy shouldn't be only the final step. If you want to fight this correctly, you have to also to deal with the scholars who are teaching this hatred and this violence. Otherwise, you will continuously treat the symptom of the disease while leaving the disease itself. Number two, the theological reform. I will give you an example here. I probably should have mentioned that I authored a modern and interpretation for the Quran that uses certain linguistics to in a way to change the interpretations to prevent this level of violence and hatred. So for example, a verse like kill the infidels wherever you find them. It looks impossible how to deal with this verse. I personally struggled with it when I was young a lot, and the Salafi scholars were supportive of it. The Sufi scholars, the mystical Islam, didn't give me any theological answer. So having a theological interpretation that changes these ways of thinking can add to the solution. I'm not saying this is the solution. This is one component of multi-tactical strategy. Each tactic can bring significant decline or certain decline in the process, and adding them together can bring change. Don't wait for the one single magical solution. It doesn't exist. You have to integrate different tactics together and play them like a symphony, all of them working together to make it change within in the world in a good direction. So this verse, for example, giving attention to al or the, this with red letters here, is al, or it means the in Arabic. The verse is saying al kafirin, or the infidels. It's like if I said to you, I'm going to a White House or going to the White House. Just by defining, putting the before the word can define and specify the violent meaning of many of the verses in the Quran, specifically to the early wars of Islam or early stage of Islam, and not today. So by reading the text itself, instead of reading such verse and thinking to attack your neighbor, you will read it in a historical context that's only limited to this group of people. I actually took it further, and I remember I learned this from a Jewish rabbi, to be honest with you, the levels of interpretations. And I applied it in this verse saying, who are those infidels? They are the ones who fought Muhammad in the early stage of Islam. Why the Quran was against them? According to the Quran, they fought the early believers and burned many of them alive and kicked them out of their homes because they have a different belief system. What is the common theme of these actions is to discriminate against small religious minorities if they have different views from you. What can we learn today from this is not to discriminate against small religious minorities, otherwise we will be like them, those infidels, exactly. So I changed the way the interpretation goes, which you can completely change the way people read and understand the religious text. You need to change this, makes it specific. If the Quran can use another word called man kafar, which means also infidels, but can generalize the meaning to everyone. The verses that uses violence in the Quran, I can say with confidence, 100% of them have the suffix that define it to particular group of people. So you can really significantly diminish some levels of violence if such interpretations are promoted. And I have a Facebook page. I created it based on this interpretation. I have more than 2 million followers for it in the last couple of years. So it's to some extent things are changing, but still not significant enough to say you can see the situation is bright or anything. Changing the thinking traits that leads to radicalism. I mean by thinking traits like absolutism, judgmentalism and literalism, being very literal in your way of thinking. And absolutism here, I give examples that's not religious, not theological, but can help change the thinking process. I can do this via advertising systems through the whole Middle East, for example, that uses examples like this. Two people are fighting over if this photo is for an old lady or a young princess. And they were fighting to unbelievable level. And what happened? You are sitting here, you are saying it is an old lady. Now go to see it from the other side. It is the opposite. So if you put yourself in the position of the other, you will probably judge things completely differently. So you start to make people question if I am 100% correct or I could be 99. That makes a huge difference. The radical typically think 100%, not 99. And changing this trait, thinking traits, also judgmentalism. I draw a river for them, I call it Nahr al-Haqiqa, or the river of the truth, or righteousness. At the end of the river, point 100, point is the truth. And we see some guy at point A and another guy at point B. Humans tend to say, or many people say, oh, the one at point A is much better. I can judge him, he is much better. And the guy at point B are bad guy, he's too far from righteousness. How about if you knew that the guy at point A has started from point 100 and he's moving backward, and the guy at point B has started from point 0 and he's moving forward? You start to question the whole concept that my ability, I'm able to judge you. And once you stop judging someone, you may not be able to hate him, because you judge someone as bad, then you hate him. So if you focus on these thinking traits and have I have already complete system ready to go, believe me, to fight this at a big level. It just didn't see the light yet. Also literal ways of thinking. I used to bring a cup of water for people and say, is drinking this water halal or haram? Most Muslims say it is halal. It's allowed. Halal means allowed. Haram, not allowed. I mention this because once your way of thinking is based on if it is halal, I am allowed to do it, then killing apostates is halal, declaring jihad is halal, stoning women to death is halal. Once your way of judgment became if it is halal, which is the will of Allah, I can do it, then you start to go blindly into the direction of violence and hatred and all what you see. So I'm questioning here if this concept can change by saying if this is halal or haram. They say halal. Then I ask them, if someone now is dying of thirst beside me, and if I drank this water, he will die of thirst. He will die. And if I gave this water to him, he will live. Then I repeat the question again. Is drinking this water now permissible or halal or not permissible? And let them think to get the answer, because this is the best way in education, the tactics. I have degrees in cognitive psychology as well, and this is one of the ways I used in one of my models. It's called the generation effect, which is instead of telling the answer to a person, let the person generate the answer. Don't give them the answer. Let them generate it and think to generate it. And this is what I do in this cognitive psychology-based educational tactic to fight the thinking traits of radicalism. Also, shaking the foundations strategy. Make the radicals feel that the books they are using are not accurate. For example, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. The wheel is there already. According to many hadith and sunnah and sharia books, they claim that there is a Quranic verse that disappeared because after the death of Muhammad, because a goat ate this verse. That's why it's not existent in our Quran today. This is not an opinion. This is what is written in the major Islamic books. So just promoting facts like this make them question the integrity and the authenticity of what they have. Negative reinforcement, it has to be painful, as I mentioned to you. It has to be immediate in time and has to have a clear message. Like, for example, after the radical threatened France and the French, the cartoonists, what happened? The cartoonists didn't show really much strength. If they told the moment you have an attack on us, we will have more cartoons, not less cartoons, against, then the radicals would have thought twice before doing an attack. But what happened when you show them weakness, they attack you again. So the immediate painful reaction here, and I remember after the attack of the first attack in France on the journalists on Charlie Hebdo journal, the reaction was very weak, not supportive of the cartoonists. You didn't feel much. Many of them actually resigned and decided not to write cartoon about Islam, which brought the opposite message, brought positive reinforcement for them to attack Paris again, which was within few months. Had the reaction been, okay, this is our reaction, you do it again, we will do more, and more cartoons are published, they would have thought twice before attacking France. So that's why dealing with these people is not a joke. It's very complex, and you need to know what is painful for them, because death is not painful for them. Okay? There are other things. I will not be able to mention them, okay? For some reason. The message has to be clear also that we are doing this because you did this. Because if you did something negative against them and you did not create the link, they will use it against you, say, look how bad they are, and they justify other things against you. But if you correlated it in the mind, create a link called the spreading activation model in the brain, to create a link with what they did to you, you are doing this because they did that to you, then it will work as a negative reinforcement. If you separated them and it was not clear in your message, you can have the opposite effect. So it has to be very clear. I am doing more cartoons because you attacked me. But if you didn't say because, they will say, look, these people deserve more attacks. But now they will start to question themselves. Oh, we probably should stop attacking them because they will have more cartoons. This is how human mind works. We need to avoid any positive reinforcement. Having our women troops wearing hijab to satisfy the culture in Afghanistan is a positive reinforcement. Too much bowing to the king of Saudi Arabia by our president is a positive reinforcement. I'm serious. Having our major politicians wearing the hijab, which is, let me explain something. For a Muslim woman to wear the hijab, it is a form of supremacy and dignity. But for some non-Muslim wearing it to satisfy us, she is subjugated to Sharia rules. It's a sign of subjugation, not supremacy. It's completely different. Having our president defending the hijab in his speech in Cairo is like, I predicted that day, I had a very detailed analysis of the speech, and I said likely terrorism globally will increase because he gave them reassurance that he will never attack them in their weak area, the hijab. He said to them, I will defend it. So if I am radical on the other side, I say, excellent, thank you. Now I know I will attack you forever, and you will not even touch the most important thing for me. So this is how it worked. And also telling them we will protect the zakah, for example, the charitable. Do you know that according to Islamic rules, that's unequivocal, it's in the Quran, it's not an opinion, it's not even an opinion of some scholar. Part of the zakah should go to jihad. Is not mentioned literally in the Quran, it's an interpretation, but I'm telling you what is mentioned literally. But it is part, it's another part, certainly jihad, okay? But I'm giving you another example here, additional one, is to go to support converting people to Islam. So we in America, as a secular country, are paying our taxes, and there is tax deduction for our organizations that go and do preaching and converting people to Islam. Does this make any sense in a secular society that separate religion from politics? Does this make any sense? When the president himself said, I will protect the zakah, while part of it goes to jihad, while part of it goes to converting us. So our money that's supposed to come back to us is now going to help converting people to Islam. I'm really surprised. And when they come to say we don't want to talk about religion, what do you mean? You are already supporting conversion of other religion by allowing this system to exist. So the messages are positive reinforcement, unbelievable. The last part here is the appreciation of beauty in the Muslim world. Let me illustrate this. If you noticed in Muslim societies, they suppress music, art, colors, all black. Okay, it's not the rugby team of New Zealand. I'm doing all black. The cover, they call it the all black. The women are wearing black. So what is the relationship? Why they do this? Why do they suppress art and the music? Why? Because after some time, when you don't see colors, when you don't see any element of beauty in the society, music, art, colors, you lose the ability to distinguish what is beautiful and what is ugly. So after some time, when your brain loses this ability, it becomes easy to fill it with ugly things. It's like if you lost the ability to distinguish between good taste and bad taste. If I destroyed the taste receptor of someone and he lost the ability to distinguish between the beautiful taste and the ugly taste, now I can put mud and the grass in his mouth and he will eat them. He does not feel, he cannot distinguish. So the same phenomenon occurs at the mental level. When they suppress music and art and the beauty in the Islamic societies, after some stage, people lose the ability to distinguish between the beautiful and the ugly. And they fill their brain and mind with evil and ugly things to unbelievable level. So that is the relationship why all of them suppress these elements of beauty in the society. The last thing in 2 minutes, okay, is discovering or detecting covert radicalism. And I put a photo of this guy, Nidal Hassan, because had this guy been discovered at an earlier stage, how many lives would have been saved? Many of them would have been sitting with us today. Many of their children wouldn't have lost their father, okay? Many of their wives wouldn't have been widows. Don't tell me about their mothers, what they felt. So I'm talking here about a loss of not just few human beings, but this can be at a much bigger level. If we detected early radicalism, this can make a difference. I'll give you this is very short talk for me. I can talk 3 days continuously on this, okay? So forgive me, I will give just samples, okay? One of the things that can help, and I'm not advocating to use one of them by itself, but you have to use many ones, and in the proper context. You have to see the whole context, okay? You cannot just rely 100%. You can add this. The speed of response to critical questions. If you ask someone, what do you think about ISIS or Bin Laden? If he is genuinely against them, you say, they are evil. Reflexly, it will not take a second between your question and his answer, no delay. But if he started to swallow and think, and after a couple of seconds he say, oh, Bin Laden is bad, then this speed of response, this delay, this gap means a lot for me. If the answer is not genuine from your heart, it will take time to say it. And if you are lying, the sympathetic nervous system works and it makes salivary secretion thick, and that's why people start to swallow, because they thicken salivary secretions, okay? So what I am saying is this delay in response can be very meaningful in certain contexts. The other context, if someone used to say to you, you say to him, Salamu alaikum, if he was a Muslim and he is saying to you, Wa alaikum salam, which means peace be upon you, and you answer by peace be upon you too, okay? That's fine. But if one day he came and say to you, Wa alaikum, which means upon you, without repeating the word peace, this simply means he is beginning radicalization. This was one of the very early things I learned, and many learned in our radical groups, is whenever non-Muslim tells you Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you, never repeat the word peace to these bad people. Just tell them Wa alaikum, upon you. I will not go into the theology of it, but I'm giving you the last step here, okay? Upon you. So if some guy, and the change is very significant, really. I feel if some guy was responding normally to the word assalamu alaikum, and then he is taking more time to respond, not more time here, I mean, he is not repeating the word peace in his reply, this can be very significant. If you added it to other features, you can detect early radicalization at a level to prevent atrocities and disasters. Also the beard and the change. Typically, Sunni Muslims, when become religious, they have to shave the mustache. Some of them do it with the angle only, they shave the angle here. Some go further to shave the whole mustache. This according to hadith of Prophet Muhammad, that you have to wear a beard and shave the mustache. This is hadith of Muhammad, according to hadith books. So how about Dr. Ayman al-Zawahri? Now the first in command of Al-Qaeda. Isn't he applying the hadith of Prophet Muhammad? Why he is not shaving his mustache? Do you know why? Because he is now living in jihad. When you live in a jihadi activity, you are not allowed to do any cosmetic work in your facial hair. That's prohibited, religiously prohibited. And that's why he's allowing it to grow. So if someone who was like the one in the middle and he started to allow his mustache to grow, there are two possibilities actually. He could be becoming less religious, not caring about shaving the mustache, not caring about the hadith of Prophet Muhammad. Or he is now in jihadi activity. So you have to see the other things like assalamu alaikum, the speed of response, and not only that, you can go and observe the way they stand. This is in Guantanamo Bay here. Actually, my wife detected it on CNN, and she told me exactly how you describe them. Shoulder to shoulder, foot to foot. You have to stand like a duck like this, and very annoying. I remember I mentioned this early in the talk, how we used to stand big. So you see the feet here touching one another. I will take you to another mosque that's less radical or could be moderate. You see how the gaps here between the legs are far away from one another, and the shoulders. I will return to this photo to see there is no single gap between the shoulders, no single gap between the feet. They are standing wide base like this. So if a mosque, for example, changed after a certain imam or leader of the arrived, and people changed their attitude or way of standing from this one to this one, then you have to think twice that this is in the path of radicalism. Finally, thank you so much, and it was a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
It's not often that you hear a Muslim thinker that talks like Dr. Hamid, is it? I'm assuming that there are questions, and as long as he and we have energy, you're welcome to ask. So
I have.
Anybody?
Yes, please. Oh, sorry, you will direct. No, you directed. Sorry, my apology, ma'am. Sorry. You were next. Sorry.
What, in your opinion, would motivate a female to join the jihad group?
Typically, it's not the sex deprivation syndrome. Typically, it is likely extreme religious motivation, desiring to just avoid hell. Just by avoiding hell itself is a dream for many people, not to go to this hell, okay? And also revenge, as I mentioned sometimes. If someone, for example, was raped by a soldier in Shisha, for example, as I mentioned, the Black Widows, some of their stories can make you understand that's a form of revenge. So if her son died, for example, and or her husband died in a brutal way, she sometimes want to revenge. So likely it is the main two factors. There are others, but just for the covering all the questions, these are the two main things: is to avoid hell, and number two, to avoid, because by dying as a shaheed or martyr, she guarantees paradise. So extreme devotion in the religion, desire to be in paradise, and to avoid hell can make someone reach that level of doing suicide bombing if she is a female. And or if she lost someone, if she has no hope in life also, for example, she may say, okay, this is the best, fastest way to go to paradise. Yeah, yes, please.
Thank you, Dr. Hamid.
My
That was
pleasure.
wonderful, Richard. I
My,
really appreciate it.
my pleasure.
What would you say are the most authoritative books on Sharia besides, let's say, Reliance of the Traveler?
Uh-huh.
That,
Look, Sharia is basically a religious system that is based on several sources. So you cannot say this book is Sharia or that book. The reality is the sources of Sharia are the following. Number one, the Quran. Number two, the hadith of Prophet Muhammad, like Al-Bukhari and the. Number three, the actions of the Sahaba, which are the disciples of Prophet Muhammad. There are whatever they did, Sahaba, Sahaba, Sahaba. The actions of the disciples. So if they did jihad, then their actions became a rule for Sharia. Number four, the interpretations of the Quran, like Ibn Kathir, Al-Qurtubi. So you have a commentary beside the Quranic text, okay? Number five, there are five sources for Sharia. Number five, the jurisprudence. There are four main schools of jurisprudence. Sometimes he added five called Ibn Hazm. It's different than the Shia ones, but the schools of jurisprudence. So if you ask me what are the sources of Sharia, that is the question should be, is these five sources: the Quran, the Hadith, the actions of the Sahaba, the jurisprudence, and the interpretations or commentaries of the Quran. These are all elements of Sharia. But the different, let me add one thing, it's important here to mention, thank you for the question, that when people say there is a difference between different scholars in interpretations for Sharia, that's absolutely correct. However, the difference is not in the difference is not in the main principles. The difference in the details. Like, for example, all of them agreed on the stoning of women to death, but they may differ in the type of the stones, big or small. I'm serious. That's the only difference between them, like things like this. So I mentioned it clearly in what I call the ABC's test of radical Islam. I should probably have mentioned this today, which is simply, when I came to America, I found people fighting over if this group is radical or moderate. And I said to them, do you have any parameters for radical and moderate? They say, no. Then how come do you fight about something with no parameters? It's like fighting if the pyramid is big or small. What do you mean big or small? Big compared to what and small compared to what? It's big compared to me and small compared to galaxy. So we can be fighting forever for something if we don't have clear definition that this number above or equal to this number, we will call it big, or less than this, we'll call it small. Then we can have standards of language to talk about. So I put a definition for radical Islam. I call this the ABC's test of radical Islam. And it's A for apostate killing, B for beating women and the barbaric treatment of women in general, like stoning, C calling Jews pigs and monkeys. And I will never forget that moment when I was in Dearborn, Michigan, and I was speaking in front of big audience, around 900, and some guy, he was imam, Muslim imam from Senegal. He interrupted the speech and said to me, Dr. Hamid, why you mention these ABCs? I am a moderate imam and I participate in interfaith dialogue and I actually have many Jewish friends here in the community. I said to him, look, imam, instead of telling me and the audience how moderate you are, would you mind to prove this to us tonight? And everyone listened what I'm going to tell him. I said to him, would you mind, the imam, to invite me and some of our Jewish friends and brothers and sisters who are sitting with us tonight to your mosque next Friday prayer, and instead of telling us how moderate you are, just stand up in front of your congregation and say it clearly, loudly and unambiguously that Jews are not pigs and monkeys. Would you do this, imam? He didn't say a word. It was silence like this. It was silence. He retreated and returned back to his seat, and people applauded, but that's not the issue. The issue is, it's so easy for people to say, I am a moderate. Prove it to me. Stand against these ABCs, then I will believe you are a moderate. It's all on my website if someone wants the rest of them. Yes, sir. Oh, sorry, I will come to you next. Oh.
Is most of this in the book? Because I'm sorry I didn't take notes.
Yes, most.
Most of what you
Yes,
said,
all.
circles and everything?
Yes, yes, absolutely. The new version. This is the new version.
But all the ideas are.
Yes.
On the right of the American political spectrum,
Yeah.
there is a tendency to equate the Muslim Brotherhood with ISIS and Al Qaeda. And part of the method of argument is to claim that someone is somehow connected to the Muslim Brotherhood and therefore they're radical and can't be trusted.
Yeah.
The reason I raise the point is a number of years ago, I heard Saad-Din Ibrahim.
Yeah.
You know who he is.
I know him. I know him personally.
Speaking
Yeah.
at the American Enterprise Institute.
Yeah.
It would have been around 2006 or so. Or
Yeah, but what is the concept?
Yeah, and he said he said nobody has pinned an act of violence on the Muslim Brotherhood for at least 35 years.
Okay.
And he thought there were people within the group who one could talk to. And then a little bit later, I reported this to James Woolsey, who I believe is well regarded in this institution.
Yeah.
And I told him this, and he said, "Well, I'm inclined to give him his opinion a lot of weight because he knows the culture more than your average Westerner." That's what he told me.
Yeah, but it's a matter of thinking. He might be evaluating the situation. He didn't say I will follow him or believe him blindly. He said I will give it some weight to consider. It doesn't mean he believed in this.
I said that's right.
He didn't say he will follow this opinion. He said give it weight, which mean he, and I think with the position of Saad-Din Ibrahim, it's fair enough, Mr. Woolsey, to give his view some form of respect. Okay, it doesn't mean I will follow it. It doesn't mean I will. But let me tell you something. When you see it that way, did Bin Laden himself went in the aeroplane and exploded the Twin Towers? No. So why we consider him a terrorist? Because he orchestrated it. The same, the Muslim Brotherhood do not deny any of these ABCs. And I challenge them, okay? Not a single one. Number two, the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood, Sheikh Al-Qaradawi, recently said that it's okay for a person to do, a Muslim, to do a jihadi activity, suicide bombing, as long as he got the approval from, this is on video. It's not an opinion. I can show this to you on video. Saying it, articulating it. It's okay as long as he got the opinion and the acceptance from his Islamic group. He shouldn't do it on his own. He was against just the what do you call it here? The lone wolf terrorist, the one by himself. He was against this, but he was not against it if he got the approval of his organization, like Hamas or ISIS or whatever. So this is the kind of people we are dealing. This is the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood who justified killing Jewish women in Israel if they are pregnant because he's saying the child would be a Jew. So he was justifying killing them. This is the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood, sir.
What was the date of this?
It's like, it's very hard to remember the exact date, but I can, if you connected with me, please feel free to give, my email is Tawfiq Hamid, my name, it's here. Connect them and at gmail.com, okay? Send me and I will try to find it for you to send you the whole thing, but it might be in Arabic. I'm not sure if memory translated it or not. I will get another question, sir.
If it's later than Saad-Din Ibrahim's talk at AEI, then you can't blame Saad-Din Ibrahim.
Look, Saad-Din Ibrahim was sitting beside me in a dinner around 9 years ago in Italy after being invited to soft power conference by the Italian government. And we were invited by the president of Italy to certain palace in a dinner, okay? He was sitting on my left side and someone called Rachel Posky was sitting on my right side, okay? I remember her, she was helping me at that time. And he was sitting and we discussed the issue of democracy and radical Islam. Dr. Saad-Din Ibrahim, whom I know personally, he's a highly respected person, but his knowledge about the theology of the religion and the dynamics of the brain process of the jihadists is not his area of expertise. Okay, he cannot claim it is his area of expertise. So he's judging things just from a political level. Okay, and I remember very well, I talked with him at that time, and I said to him, sudden implementation of democracy in the Middle East can bring disasters, and I called it sudden democracy syndrome, and I have op-eds back then written about this. And I said clearly, if you want to implement a democracy, you have to go into 3-stage process. Stage 1, to weaken radical Islam over 5 years period. Stage 2, to teach the people the values of peaceful coexistence. Love your neighbor, respect other views and opinions in your society. Stage 3, you go to the ballot. Jumping to the ballot would cause a disaster. And he was against me, and he said to me, I bet Muslim Brotherhood will not gain more than 20% or 25%. I said to him, I believe it will be more than 60. This was 9 years ago. We were sitting together in that place. I met with him recently in some location also here, so I respect him highly. But when it comes to the issue of radical Islam, it's a form of expertise that you don't gain by, as my wife, I will quote her again here, she said they don't have a chapter on radical Islam in political science usually, and that is what is missing. Okay, so if you could be the best professor in political science, but radical Islam and the radical mindset is a different story. Yes, sir.
How often and in what ways do you try to promote, self-reflection or self-criticism in the Muslim world? I mean, just looking around the audience today, I would bet to say there's probably no other practicing Muslims here other than yourself. And to listen to you speak, it's rare that I've found or talked to other individuals, who had been strongly conservative in their interpretations of Islam become, self-critical or self.
So are you asking me how often do I?
Promote. Like you said, the example you were at.
Look, I'm generally speaking, I don't. Classify myself with the current understanding of Islam. I'm completely against it. Okay, as I classified myself, I'm a Muslim by faith, a Christian by the spirit, a Jew by heart, and above all, I am a human being. I try to do this as I could, but I prefer to do it via the internet for several reasons. And I can say it's pretty successful with the limited resources I have, which is practically only my personal, I'm doing it personally, okay, without like real support from anyone. I managed to have more than 2 million followers on Facebook, to have more than 250,000 views for an anti-radicalization YouTube channel that I created. It's in Arabic, so I do it at a big scale. I don't believe in monumental efforts to go to convince one person. This some people can do this, but it's not me. Okay, I can do it at a much bigger scale, and I already proved this. So I prefer to do what I call the e-reformation through the internet. I believe this can play a major role. But thanks. Yes, sure.
I'd like to ask you a question about Robert Riley's book, The Closing of the
Yes.
Mind. I found it really intriguing, and the description of what happened around the 12th or 13th century when the hardliners won.
Yeah.
Summarize it very briefly. Seems to me to explain a great deal, and I thought perhaps you might share just a minute or two with all of us about Riley's approach and those.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for the question. Our friend Bob Riley is a great human being and a great author in this field, first of all. And here is an issue that I admit that it was for me actually unique and new, and I was like impressed with it personally. He related what we call the Mu'tazilites, was a movement within Islam that started critical thinking, that started to look to the scriptures using logic and using the thinking process. And they said the text is not above, the religious text is not above our way of thinking. Our thinking is more important than the religious text because our thinking is the way that allows us to understand it. So it has to take the priority, the way we think. So Al-Mu'tazilites were a movement that if it succeeded, Islam would have been completely different today, completely different. But what happened, the hardliner, as you mentioned, succeeded to suppress, kill the Mu'tazilite, and the Islam remained very literal with very narrow mindset style of people who suppressed the critical thinking completely, and the outcome was what we see today. And in his view, which I fully agree with him, encouraging the critical thinking of the text and having a different way of thinking that's similar to the Mu'tazilite era can change the paradigm and can change, do major changes in what we see today. And I fully agree with his approach completely, 100%. Yes, sir.
First of all, brilliant presentation.
Thank you. My pleasure.
A few short questions. Will you be giving a similar presentation anywhere soon in the area?
If I am invited, yes.
Okay. Is this
I don't impose myself.
is the structure, or similar to this on the internet?
I can. If they
We will be
videotape,
giving one to my church because I'm organizing a conference now. My church is out in the back end of nowhere. It's in Upperville, Virginia. It's about an hour and a half drive from here, near the edge of the Shenandoah. But if you want to come out, the Saturday after Easter, April the 2nd, Dr. Hamid is scheduled to talk to us.
yeah, and someone talked to me recently about the Cosmos Club possibility. Cosmos, if it happened, it will be close to the area.
And
Yeah.
finally, the last part. Hayan Hirsi Ali.
Ayan,
book
yeah.
Called Heretic.
Yeah.
Which she argues that Islam is need of a reformation.
Yeah.
What do you estimate the chances of a reformation in Islam?
It's happening already to some extent. Let me be very clear with you. If I started to fight Islamic radicals more than 30 years ago. Okay, before September 11th, I was fighting them. Okay, not after. And I can tell you, I only had few people following me in more than 25 years. Just in 2 years, with the internet and with the current exposure of the radical elements of Islam and the text like the goat thing and that 8 hadith of Prophet Muhammad, all this is being exposed in unbelievable manner over the internet. So the Muslim world are starting now to see there are millions of atheists now coming within the last few years in the Muslim world, mostly from Saudi Arabia. Can you imagine? So there is a beginning of a revolt by the young generation against these forms of teaching. So I can see this happening. And it's growing, and it depends on the internet to a great extent, to be honest with you, and the content that you will put on the internet, how to fight using the internet correctly. So there is a hope for some change, but again, I cannot rely fully on one tactic. That's why I mentioned several tactics here, because there is no single tactic that can solve it. So I can say things are moving in this direction. But you have two opposing powers within the Muslim world. One power is toward more radicalism like ISIS, and one power is going to the periphery of the circles, okay, and even outside these peripheries, becoming atheists. So you have two opposing powers, and it depends on several variables. Who will we support? Are we supporting the wrong guys? Are we inviting care organization to the White House, for example, or we are inviting Zuhdi Jasser, for example, a great man and a reformer, if you heard about his name. So who are we supporting? So there are several factors, political factors also can play a role, which direction will win. But there is element of a change that needs to be empowered, but again, don't rely fully on it. You have to have the other tactics moving together to achieve real significant success. Any question more? Or? Sure, okay, absolutely.
I think we've been here for nearly 2 hours now, and as you can tell, Dr. Hamid can talk for a prolonged period of time, and everything he has to say is incredible. So I think we got to listen for a while longer. However, we do need to end. He will be here for a bit longer also to sign books and to talk to more of you informally. So let's thank you again for coming.
Okay. Thank you so much.